So now that you've got your carburetor all rebuilt, you want to put it back on the saw. And usually on these carburetors, like in another one of my videos, there's all these little plastic retainers. The manufacturer puts them there so nobody tampers with them. I've had to take them off to adjust the carburetor. Now if you look on the carburetor, you're going to see an H under the screw on the right. That's the high-speed screw, and the one on the left is a low-speed. I've got the low-speed screw at about 1 3/4 out, and the high-speed I've got it at about 1 1/2 out. The way you measure that is that you basically, when you're tuning your chainsaw, you play with the screws either by going in, by going out or in until you feel the saw runs better. Usually if it runs too lean, you would turn out the low screw. That would give it more gas. And the high speed may help adjust it at high speeds. Now to tell how many turns you've got out, you screw in the screw right to the end. Don't over tighten. When it stops, stop. Then you count 1/2 turn, 1 turn, 1 1/2, and then 1/4. And then you do the same here. So 1/2, 1 turn, 1 1/2. I'm going to leave it like that, and then when the saw runs, I can always go back and fine tune it by holding the throttle down and revving it and turning the screws at the same time. So I'm going to put the carburetor back on. Now the first thing you want to do is hook up the fuel lines. Now on this one, the tiny fuel line that goes into the fuel tank goes on the top. And then there's one other fuel line on this particular model of chainsaw, and it will go into the bottom screw. Make sure that the fuel line's pretty snug there, because it can actually suck in some air. It's a bit loose. So what I'm going to do is, with a pair of snips, is just snip a bit off of the fuel line. Make sure you've got enough line to do that. And usually what this does is it will go on tighter because it's a fresh area of the fuel line. Now you want to hook back the throttle linkage on the saw. Also, one thing before I continue is you want to make sure this gasket here, the intake gasket, is in good condition. And if it is, just continue. Now with the throttle linkage, you just move the carburetor until you get it in, and then move it like that. So now it's in. I'm just going to slide the carburetor back onto the bolts. Make sure your fuel line is not caught behind the carburetor and the manifold. You want to make sure that that's all clear. And then just slide the carburetor onto the bolts. So there it's going in. It's going to sit loose like that until you've got it all tightened up. Next thing is you want to put in the choke lever, and that's fairly simple. You just match up the two mechanisms together and then push, and you're going to feel it clip back in there. Next thing is to put back the air breather. Before you do that, you want to make sure the throttle's working, so just hold the carburetor and try it. You can see that it works on the left there. Next thing is to put this back on, just like that, and then you grab your two 5/16 nuts, put those on, and tighten these fairly tight. Not overly tight again, but just fairly tight, because there's a lot of vibrations. You want to tighten them as you go on each side. You don't want to tighten one really tight on one side and then the other side. So just kind of rotate between the two. Then put your air breather back on. If you're just going to start it and stop it, you can run it without the black cover. But if you're going to run it a long time, I suggest you put the black cover on, because it actually helps to cool the engine down with the fan spinning. So I'm going to put it back on anyways. There we go. And I can always adjust my carburetor from the 2 holes here. So the saw is ready to go. I may have to adjust the carburetor with the screws down here. Once you've done that, if you don't want it to undo itself, the timing, you can take the black cover off and put these back on just to retain the screws there for moving again. If it stops, just prime it again. Choke. This one's running a bit lean, so I'm going to open up the low screw on it just to give it a bit more fuel.